Hi everyone, my name is Natalie Dawson. Welcome to Leader Talk. This show is proudly brought to you by Brainiact. Each week we are meeting with incredible leaders from around the world to discuss all things leadership and business insights. Each person coming on this talk show has given up their valuable time for one very clear purpose: to give back to small and medium business owners. Have you ever wanted to conduct research for a new product or even a service, but are not sure where to begin? Or perhaps you aren't really sure what you even need to research? Well, today, my guest co-host Mimo Lebrano, CEO of Sandhurst Fine Foods, and I are fortunate to chat to our guest speaker, Angela Orsaris, Managing Director at the Market Intelligence Company, a leading Australian-owned and independent company that specialises in business-to-business and industrial market intelligence and research. Angela is here today to share her knowledge and help us all build better businesses with research. Welcome to the show, Angela.
Thanks so much, Natalie, and thank you, Mimo, as well. Pleasure to be here.
Welcome on board, Angela. Lovely to have you.
Thank you.
It is great to have you. Angela, we begin each of our shows with two fun questions that we ask our guests. So we have your two we'd love to ask you. What is your favourite food and why?
Okay. Well, I mean, I love all food, but I'm particularly fond of Italian food. And so much so that my dream was to marry someone who was Italian so that I could eat Italian food and cook Italian food all the time. And I managed to do that. I managed to score an Italian husband many, many years ago. And, Giuseppe, very good Italian name. And when I got closer to him and we'd organised to get married and whatnot, I found out his mother's job was a cook and a chef in a restaurant. So for Italian food. So talk about hitting an ultimate jackpot.
So Angela, I've got to qualify that. There's no such thing as Italian food. What part of Italy are we talking about now?
Well, my husband's family is from the region of Abruzzo.
Fantastic. Very good.
So very good farm folk, lots of good food and fresh produce there, etc. Seafood as well, because they're not far from Pescara.
So you probably people don't understand or don't realise that Abruzzo is the pasta capital of Italy. It's where the best pasta brands come from. So that's amazing. That's very good. So,
absolutely. And I've learned since being married to an Italian and living with Italians that pasta is not enough for a main meal. That when I married him, dinner had to consist of pasta as a starter as well as a second. And if I only had pasta, then I had to have something smaller as a first.
Oh, that's brilliant.
That's about a 3-hour conversation, but anyway.
Oh, yeah. No. We Italians live to eat. It's, matter of fact.
Well, and do you like to cook, Angela? Just out of curiosity.
You love it. My mother-in-law bought me a pasta maker and a whole lot of other contraptions to cook with, and she's taught me how to use them all many, many years ago, and I use them all the time and I cook all the time. And I also cook lots of Greek too, because my heritage is Greek.
Very good. Yep.
Well, what a brilliant story. And what about your favourite holiday destination, Angela? What is your favourite holiday destination and why?
I mean, look, I do love Italy. However, I am very, very impartial to Greece, and I don't mind the Greek mainland, but I do love the Greek islands. My family are islanders from 2 different Greek islands in the Dodecanese, which is on the Adriatic side, so and they're actually very close to the Turkish coastline, and. When I can, a bit pre-COVID, I would go at least every 2 years for a holiday there. We've got a home and it's just awesome. And every island is just so different culture, different dialects, different food, traditions. It isn't just one Greece, it's, multiple Greeces. And it's just wonderful. It's just an awesome experience and the people are wonderful. So I'd have to say
we should be able to travel this year. I'm traveling in a couple of weeks. So, we should be able to plan our travel now finally after 3 years of being in prison Australia. So
that's very, very true. Very true. Hope so.
Thanks.
Oh, that's great. And Angela, before we go on, we'd love it if you could just tell us a bit more about yourself and also the Market Intelligence Company, your own business.
Right. Okay. So I went to university and I got a Bachelor of Commerce, majoring in economics and honours degree. And then I didn't have any idea what to do, and I just got offered a job. The first job I got offered was with a company back then called BIS Shrapnel, which is now known as BIS Oxford, as a market researcher. I thought, why not? Give it a go. 3 years later, I learned quite a bit at my first job in market research. And the amazing thing with that company was that I was able to do both economic forecasting and other things, but also being able to marry my background in economics with market research and primary market research. And so I learned a lot about business to business, consumer research, as well as industrial market research. And I had a client for the last 1 to 2 years while I was at BIS Oxford, and they were called Invatech, and they pretty much poached me after about a year and a half of doing half a dozen projects for them, and they poached me to set up and create a market research company that would service them and their clients, because they were a commercialization strategy consultancy. And so I set up the market intelligence division for Invatech. And so we were known as Invatech's Market Intelligence Division. I worked for them for a total of 13 years. It was pretty much myself. I employed everyone, set the systems, processes up, and also created a Sydney office for them because they were Melbourne-based. And then they became a public company, etc. And after 13 years, I decided to buy the baby that I created back. So I did a management buyout. And one day, it was March 2000, we took down Invatech Market Intelligence Division and we just put up the Market Intelligence Company. And pretty much all the staff just, stayed the same. Everything was just business as usual. All our clients was just business as usual. And they bought
the business off them, is that right?
Yeah. And that was back in March 2000. But I've been doing, between my first job, which was at BIS Oxford, my 13 years at Invatech, and then this business since 2000, I have been doing nothing else. For a person who didn't know what they wanted to do, I have been doing nothing else but market intelligence and market research now for 38 and a bit years.
That's impressive.
Yeah, and I love it.
So could I ask a question, Angela? How did you fund the buyout? Who gave you the money? Because it costs a lot of money to buy a business.
Yes, it sure does. Yeah, it sure does. The company that I bought it from wanted to have a good relationship with myself, and I wanted the same, and they still wanted to be able to use our services. And so they loaned me the money at a very preferential interest rate, which I paid off after a couple of years. So the business was debt-free after 2 years. And I was able to maintain all my staff's liabilities, like long service leave, sick leave, everything. I just took it all across. And so the staff didn't get disadvantaged in any way or lose continuation of employment or anything.
And that's because a lot of people listening will want to start a business. Though, because what was the most Googled phrase during the pandemic? I want to start a business. And people, the biggest problem with starting a business is the capital, is the oxygen, which is the money,
and then the cash flow.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if you don't have a bank, and of course you go to a bank with an idea, they'll go, well, I don't want to know about you. So that's a really interesting perspective. So
yeah, I mean, it was really hard when starting the business because I wasn't really used to running businesses, and so there was a whole accounts department and accounts receivable and payable and all these people in head office that did all these things when we were a division of this big public company. But when I started my own business, I was naively confident that it would go well, but I'd say to my office manager, okay, the 20th of every month is going to be invoicing month, assuming that everyone would pay us in our 14 days and the world would be perfect. And that's when we discovered that didn't work. So the best advice I ever got from a friend was, don't invoice once a month. Invoice daily if you can, or alternatively, at least weekly, and allow for the fact that some people will take 30 or 40 days, and these days, even 60 days looks like it's a lot more like the norm.
So you went from employee to wearing one hat to wearing what we call the three hats of sales, marketing, operations, and finance.
Absolutely, yeah.
3 hats. So you had to learn the hats that you weren't wearing, correct?
Yeah, exactly right. Very hard. And running a business and still servicing the clients all at the same time. And I'm a lot like a lot of your listeners as well, because we're still a small company ourselves. I mean, we've got 15 full-time employees, and then we do have a network of about 150 interviewers and mystery shoppers around Australia and in New Zealand. So we do have an operation in New Zealand as well, based in Auckland, but services all of New Zealand. And our head office in Sydney is in Sydney in Australia. But we ourselves have, as I said, 15 full-time employees and 150 subcontractors, a lot of them of which are on a retainer, so that we don't, so they're always available to us, as opposed to, you know, luck of the draw, you get them when you can, sort of thing.
So what do you actually do? What's the actual product?
So what we do is provide information and assistance to companies who need to better understand their market, which can include their customers, their competitors, you know, their brand positioning, you know, their prospects and growth prospects for the market, their channel or the supply chain, their channel partners, etc., as well as the products pricing and other things. And we do that through offering both combinations of desktop research or secondary desk research, because not every bit of research has to be a survey, you know, or primary research. You get so much in this day and age from desktop research and online searches and other things. And I can go into some of the searches a little bit more later. But then there's obviously the surveys, which is our primary focus. We probably do a lot of our research is in primary research, and a lot of that we tend to do over the phone. Yes, online is becoming more prevalent, but online is still not a large proportion of the work we do in the business to business space, but it is in the consumer space. And we also do mystery shopping and employee research. So lots of mystery shopping, and where we pose customers, but both for consumer type products as well as business to business types products and services. And we also do employee research, because I think the employee is the forgotten entity in all this. Half the problem in pleasing your customers is actually understanding what your employees are saying to the customer, but also whether your employees are engaged with the organisation and they're not airing the dirty laundry to the customer. And you can do all the most wonderful marketing and great job, and all it takes is one rogue employee saying something that they shouldn't have said, that's an internal thing to a customer, and it can totally snowball and, you know, change your market positioning. But so yes,
so interesting, because when we think of research, Angela, it is very much, and I'm sure the listeners will be thinking about this as well, they think it's very survey based, and, you know, they can do that themselves. But when we talk about research, it is a lot more. So for those that are listening and they think that a survey is what research is about, can you just give them a quick, just a definition of what it actually is, so they understand what the whole chat is about?
It really depends on the topic. So if you want to understand your competitor profile, if you want to know who are your competitors, where are you positioned in the competitors, how big's your market or whatever, primary research isn't always the best method, because no one's going to tell you or help you, you know, to do a competitor survey. So desk research is actually the best form of research to do, or desktop research, where you look at your industry associations, you look at your IBIS worlds and market size reports, you look at the ABS data, you look at, you know, any kind of online searches, competitor websites, competitor, you know, I suppose syndicated white paper reports, like things like that. And you can get so much information on your competitors as well as the market as a whole. And so in instances like that, if you want to understand the competitor, if you want to introduce a new product or a service and you need to understand the market per se, desk research is actually your starting point and is a big part of the research process.
Sorry to interrupt. Like, you know, a little bit of knowledge is dangerous. So same would be with desktop research. I can do a lot of that myself. So why do I need you to do it for me? So which is going to be the next question someone's going to ask.
Yeah, well, you can do a lot of it yourself. It doesn't take, you know, a rocket science to do desk research. It's more about knowing where to look, how to interpret the data. But the negative in doing it yourself, and what a lot of businesses tell us, and including myself when I was starting out, is the opportunity cost. You know, the opportunity cost of my time. So at my time, I could certainly earn X thousands of dollars in my week by focusing on what I do that I'm really good at. But if I spend a week trying to do this desk research is a labor of love. It's time consuming. You typically would allow 10 days over a course of a period to do a proper desk research exercise. And those 10 days, you might pay someone, even if it's a uni student, even if it's somebody else, a consultant who, and I'm not talking consultants like, your big McKinseys and Bain & Co. I'm talking smaller independent type people. They could end up probably costing you less than it would cost you in the time for you to do it, and the frustration of not being able to do what you're supposed to be doing, and what it might cost your customers, both in direct cost and you direct income and indirect for your time. So the other thing is, mystery shop is a really great complement to desk research. So mystery shop your competitors, mystery shop retailers and other places if they're a product that's in retail, mystery shop staff that work in other organisations, and that complements the desk research really, really well. But if you're doing employee research, if you're doing customer satisfaction or loyalty research, those things are actually best not done by you internally. Those things require an objective, independent person to do them. It doesn't have to be a professional like us. It could be, but it needs to be an objective person. They need to be able to hear what the customer's actually saying, or the employee's saying, and being able to interpret it, or what the employee might be writing down in an online survey, rather than you being able to, hear what you want to hear. And those surveys are primary surveys, whether they're online or on the phone or in person, and they should be done by an independent. Too many bad stories about people trying to do those things themselves. But and then you use, focus groups for new product and other types of research as well. So there's different methodologies and different types of places that you can get your information or source your information, depending on what the objective of the research is.
Interesting. So I know we spoke about just products now. If our listener out there may be a small home building business, for example, with 10 staff, they've got a lot of subcontractors, painters, electricians, etc.
Yep.
Is there any, if they were to conduct research, what kind of research would someone like a builder be looking at conducting?
Yeah, well, really any size builder, even small builders, and the same applied to me with 15 employees, and I do the same thing with my business. You need to be collecting information from your customers, certainly about how satisfied they are, but you need to be collecting it from an independent perspective, even if it's somebody else in your, not in your organisation, someone that might be, a uni student, external, a friend, anybody who can do this kind of thing in a rigorous and professional manner can collect information on the customer's experience with your organisation, their likelihood to use you again, their likelihood to recommend you, and how you can improve. You've always got to be able to ask that question and what you could have done better. And that all has to be, come back and implemented into the organisation. And you can, so that would be really, really important. And you can do that whether you have one customer where you talk to 10 people in that, you do things for 10 people in that customer organisation, or you can do it for, if you've got 30 customers or 20 customers or whatever, or thousands like some of our customers have. And it doesn't matter whether it's a product or a service. I use the word product here, but it's very much interchangeable with services. Whatever your deliverables are, whether it's a product, a widget, or whether it's a cleaning service or a painting service or a building service or whatever. Now, the other thing that you should be doing is you should be looking at, you must have a really good website. In this day and age, it is no longer a nice to have. It is a necessity in business to have a really good website, and a website that enables you to collect analytics from, social media. If you've done anything on social media, if you decided to post something on LinkedIn or Facebook about your business or yourself, you need to be able to track those metrics. You need to be able to measure. If you're wanting to get some feedback from people via social media question type. You might pose a question out there, or you might put one on your website. You need to be able to collect this information. You need to be able to track it, whether it's about thinking of, offering this service, would this be of interest to anybody, blah, blah, blah. Whatever you might be asking, that stuff's got to be tracked. The other key thing that I would be doing is mystery shopping, having someone mystery shop my business. You can do this with a friend, someone who's not particularly close to you, because they might not want to be nasty or tell you the truth. But you're probably better to use someone that's a little bit more removed, but it could still, you don't even have to pay for it, or just buy them a case of beer or something. But pretend to be ringing your organisation, not you obviously, but someone else in your company, and see how the response they get. Did the phone even get picked up? Did they do what they said they were going to do? Did they provide the quote? Did they send the information? Did they, because you could be losing out on so many opportunities. And because you're so busy in the business and working in the business, or being out and about, giving quotes and building and things like that, you really do need to, if you are relying on other people to, help grow your business or support your business or sell your business, or provide customer service for your business, you do need to be looking at how well those touch points are interacting with your customers and potential customers.
Is it true that you'd also then find some key frustrations either in your industry or your business that you can then add on as a service? So, for example, if they're having trouble getting through your website, or someone else's website is better than yours, then you find a key frustration. And a lot of businesses have turned key frustrations into products, For example, when DHL and, FedEx sort of came out, they said, well, why would you invest in those companies when Australia Post does a great job? Well, there's a thing called traceability and tracking and things like that. Okay, we're going to pay more with DHL, but we've got full tracking, and, it's a better service. And a better service means I'll pay for it. So, there's frustrations which you would cover as well, I would say.
Yeah. So there's lots of different things that they could be doing. They could also be making sure that they join the relevant industry association, whether it's master builders if you're a builder, whether it's, but also HIA, using the Housing Industry Australia body to get information. They do a lot of white papers, a lot of information. They run lots of podcasts and webinars and things that don't usually...
We have a phrase for those. We call them misery loves company, because that's what happens when as a small business owner, you've got a lot of misery, so you want to share your misery. And so we, for example, in Family Business Australia, we connect with other family businesses. I'm not saying misery loves company, but you can share your issues, and you've got an association. And there's usually someone that's doing something that you're trying to do that has done it before. And that's what you'll find with these associations. So I think you're 100% on the money on that one, Angela. That's a great idea.
And people don't. They either think they don't have the time for it. It isn't just about networking or sharing stories. It's actually also about learning and finding out what information, what tools, what support, what software you can access through them to help your business, or who can be a mentor for you if you're embarking on something that's a little bit left field or something like that.
And that sort of goes into leadership too, Natalie, doesn't it? That we're talking about leadership and what the leadership styles are. And I think we touched on it earlier. The difference between leadership now and leadership 20 years ago. It's what's your observations there, Angela?
Wow, leadership has really changed. I mean, in the past you couldn't approach the CEO or the general manager or whatever, the MD, whatever he was, you had to pass their gatekeeper, who usually sat right in front of their front door of their office. You would see him in the kitchen, and it would be a very cursory hello with your head tilted down most of the time. In this day and age, even in some of the really, really big organizations, you wouldn't know who the leader is. You could have a group of people in the foyer, and one of them's a managing director, and you wouldn't know. I mean, the fact that we're casually dressing a little bit more, and, you might still get guys wearing suit pants and a shirt, but the ties are pretty much gone, for most industries. And, it's really hard to tell who is the most senior person. And the most senior person this day just looks like one of the guys or one of the girls. And, and they have become a lot more of a team player, and they are a lot more hands-on and more empathetic of people. I think that's probably the biggest changes I've seen, is it's no longer that sort of demarcation between all that, the line, that this is senior manager and these are everybody else, and a lot of people are now encouraged to be able, if they've got a great idea, if they've got a problem, or, it's not about going to whinge to a leader, it's about going there with a potential solution to a problem. And most good leaders now are there to listen, open door policy, etc. And, we find now that in the olden days, we never used to get a lot of the CEOs coming to our presentations about, let's say, if we were doing a customer research feedback. A lot of the CEOs thought it was, beneath them to come to something like this and waste an hour or 2 hours of their time. But these days, these sorts of things are driven by CEOs who want to make their organisations more customer-centric. They're actually in there. And when I'm doing the presentation, sometimes I don't even know who the CEO is in the room, and they're not usually the most vocal and they're not usually the most quiet. You can no longer identify that person because they're part of the team. And then I think that's great.
I think I heard once that the CEO is not spending at least exposing him or herself at least to 1 or 2 customers every week. They're not really doing their job properly.
That's exactly right. Yeah, you've got to lead by example. You've got to lead by example. And if you've got a customer-focused or customer-orientated business, then that's where you've got to be, is with the customers and with the people that are your customer interfacing staff.
You've been exposed to some big business leaders as well. And what do you think the big business leaders can tell the small business leaders? Because you're exposed to a really high-powered CEO who's billions of dollars or whatever it is in turnover. What information or what knowledge can they impart to the smaller companies, you think?
Well, I suppose another way of looking at that is that I think that sometimes being a leader of a big business is easier than being a leader of a little business, because as a leader of a big business, you have a lot more support and people that give you your information and do all this stuff for you. In a little business, obviously, you have to do it yourself or pay for it to be done by someone outside your company. But I think some of the biggest lessons that small businesses like myself had adopted that are emulating big businesses, or things that leaders from big businesses do, is more processes. I had to introduce, and I think most small companies lack process. And when the key person gets sick, or when someone else gets sick in the organisation, and especially during the whole COVID period, they don't have a process in place where things are documented so someone can just quickly step in and fill that void of that, whatever that job that person was doing. And the other thing is risk minimization and contingency. Big businesses do that really, really well. I'm not talking about turning into a bureaucracy by having lots of systems and processes, but part of the reason why a lot of small businesses don't win work from big organizations is because they either don't have quality systems in place and to an accredited standard, or they don't even have proper processes in place. And when you get asked about your risk minimization strategy, you don't really have one. My number 2 will take over. But number 2 will take over, but number 2 hasn't done 80% of what you do for 80% of the year. And what you get sick suddenly, you just expect them to step in, and then who's going to do number 2's work? So I think risk minimization, contingency and processes is really, really important lessons from a big business and leadership perspective that should be applied to small businesses. So think big. Don't think of yourself as a small family business or independent one-man band. Think big. When I left the company that owned us, they were a public company. So we already had a lot of these systems in place. And I was toying with the idea whether I should pay money to be audited and continue with all these accreditations and everything. Best thing I did was actually to maintain them. It kept me focused. It kept my staff focused. It gave us structure. And it enabled us to also, the processes also enabled us to measure ourselves and our performance rigorously and consistently, which is really important too.
That's cool, because you inherited big business philosophy and applied to a small business. So,
and that's what we've got to do. But we don't want the negatives of big business, and
bureaucracy and politics.
Bureaucracy, politics. So that in a perfect world, you want the processes and the risk minimization of big business type systems, but you want the small businesses agility. the agility, the flexibility, their tenacity, those kinds of characteristics and qualities is what you want to be marrying. So
and decision making, Angela.
Well, decision making, being able to make a decision, but then to be able to do it quickly. And look, the number one thing I find in all our surveys, when we do customer surveys, that most customers complain about their suppliers is that they're not responsive enough. So whether it's making a decision, sending a quote, getting back to them with a query, acknowledging an email, managing their expectations on when they're going to receive feedback or quotes and things like that. So responsiveness, you have to be responsive, is the one takeout that we do 100,000 interviews a year, and we do over 100 customer satisfaction, by way of example, surveys a year, from small companies to big companies. And all the customers, pretty much I'd say for 80% of these surveys, customers are whinging about their suppliers not being responsive enough. Yeah, and it's communication and response. And if you've got processes in place, you won't forget you had to get back to someone. You won't forget that you have to respond and provide this and that to somebody.
And it's a bit easier these days because the email's got reminders and you do follow-ups and things like that, correct? So it's not like it was in the old days where you had to keep files on your desk and, the awaiting answers file, which I used to have,
Yeah.
So it's yeah.
Do you know how many businesses lose people because they don't have good documentation and processes? They'll lose a popular sales rep, and he takes half the business with him. It doesn't matter about gardening clauses and confidentiality clauses. Half of the time you can't police or administer those.
Can't fight them.
Yeah. So they'll take all their people with them, and you don't even know who were the actual latest contacts in a customer organization that they were dealing with. What was the latest correspondence? What were the latest prices these people were charged? Because it's all in his head or in a notebook or in his own computer that he's taken with him, or downloaded, taken with him and cleared and left it empty for you. So, but if you had these data put into a system or a process that you have in your company, then people can come and go, but you're not held to ransom and your business isn't going to suffer by an individual long term. Maybe a little glitch in the short term until you can replace them and retrain someone.
It sort of brings us to the trust thing, I suppose, doesn't it, Natalie? That trust becomes a very important thing as well. And so let's talk a little bit about trust. I mean, obviously you're dealing with a lot of people on a repetitive basis, and so how do you build the trust? Because that's what I found I say it does get easier as your business gets more mature, and it does, because then that trust means that you don't have to try as hard to gain trust, and people will just say, listen, just do it for me. I know you're going to look after me. So what's your thoughts on trust?
Well, for me, and even for the companies we do surveys for, how those companies build trust, including myself, is it's not about trying to be a superhero. It's actually about showing your customer, warts and all, being open, transparent and truthful. Letting them to some degree share your pain and having empathy for you. So, and managing your customers' expectations. I have found by having a very open and transparent and being very, very honest, brutally honest with customers, even if initially it might be a bit of a shock for them, they really learn to respect you and appreciate you a lot more than someone who tells them they'll have something tomorrow and, yeah, no problem, you'll be right, mate, and then they never end up getting it. So it's not about being, really friendly and telling them what you think they want to hear. It's about actually living a day in their shoes and knowing what is it that they need from you, what are going to be the ramifications to their business, or what will be the ramifications down the line if you don't deliver what you've promised you're going to deliver. And then being totally open and transparent. And I don't mean telling someone on the day that they're expecting something from you that they're not going to get it. That had to be done beforehand, and then so that they could manage their timeframes and expectations and things like that.
We call that delivering bad news early when we talk to retailers. So we're going to have an out of stock in 3 or 4 weeks' time. We're going to advise them early, because then, not that we're, obviously it's a bad thing to be out of stock, but if we tell them on the day they order, as opposed to 3 days or 3 or 4 weeks earlier, we'll know. We will know.
Yeah. And so they can, for example, they have an event that they have to have olives at, okay? And if they have to have olives at an event and you can't get it because of your supply chain breakdown in that particular customer's case, A good supplier will lose money, but will go out and source olives from a competitor if they have to, or from some other source, to be able to not let that customer down. And if you get a customer complaint and you can address that complaint and make that customer happy and fix the problem, you will get their trust and respect.
Is it true that it's not about the complaint, it's what you do about it, Angela? That's what I learned very early on. It's not the fact you get a complaint. I mean, complaints happen all the time. It's how you react and are you indifferent to that complaint? Because if you just say, well, mate, bad luck, it's your problem, as opposed to what can I do to
exactly. You can't be indifferent. You can't be defensive. You have to take it from their perspective. It's that whole word empathetic. You've got to be empathetic. You've got to see it from their perspective. You have to listen to them, very important. You have to look at whether the complaint is genuine, and it's not about being defensive, is whether, they did something that meant your service wasn't proper or didn't work out right, or whether it was a mistake on their part, or whether it was a genuine error on your part or a genuine quality issue or whatever. Or you let them down with your service in some way. And then once you've addressed what the actual concern is, you have to be seen to be doing something about it, an investigation, a rectification, compensating them if you have to. If they've received a faulty product or bad service, you're going to do the same thing all over again for them without charging them until you get it right. And then these customers that complain and you fix it and you do it well, you win them for life. You build so much loyalty from a complaint. We have a customer where he loves it when we do his customer surveys, because we have a process that we call a red flag process. So we interview a customer. Let's say we do a customer survey for any size company. And let's say we hit one of your customers and they say to us, oh, I can't believe a market research company is calling me to do a survey for company X. I've been waiting for the guy from company X to send me his quote for 3 weeks. And what? The audacity of getting you to ring me to do a survey, but he can't give me a price. That person is so irate and so upset. He'll do the survey. He'll really give it to the company, really good. F words flying, you name it. And, our interviewers have to be very diligent and write everything verbatim. So the client gets a report full of F words, but, they need the experience. They need to see firsthand what we copped, but we raise a red flag. Now, it's not called that to the respondent or to the client, to the interviewee. The interviewer will say to that customer, now, I understand what your issues are and why you're upset. Would you like us to get somebody from company X to actually call you in the next 24 hours about this? And the person will say either yay or nay. Most of them say yes. We will call our contact at that client organisation and say, you can't promise the account manager is going to get back to them, because that's the guy that stuffed up anyway. You need to be someone really senior. You, CEO, whoever, needs to get back to this customer and deal with this complaint. We had one customer who said to me, every time we get one of your complaints, he goes, and the CEO decided to get them all himself, I would go personally out, he goes, or ring the customer, go out personally, see them. And every time I saw the customer, not only did I address their complaint, they felt special because someone important was coming to see them, apart from their regular contact, which means they were going to be heard and something was going to happen. But secondly, he goes, I made a $25,000 sale every time I saw a customer. He goes, bring on the complaints. Everyone was a winner.
Because no one sells like the owner of the business. Everyone knows.
But it's a winner. It's an opportunity. It's a cry for help.
Using your example there, Angela, if the CEO is out there selling, he's not spending money on. He's spending money on doing research, which is what he should be, or desktop research. So he's actually making the best use of his time. Because I always say, as a business unit, the business owner, the best use of your time is to get out there on the road and tell everybody about your product, because no one else can tell the story like you can. So that's great.
Exactly right.
But how interesting is that? Seeing a complaint as an opportunity. Usually we're I've got a complaint, it's the end of the world, because, they're hard to deal with, let's face it. But to actually turn it around and see it as an opportunity, it's such a great way to look at it.
But Natalie, it's not even for the customer. It's for your staff, how it makes them feel. So, people in customer service call centres and stuff, or even reps, when something, let's say, is happening, there's supply chain shortages now with transport and everything else, delays, there are so many people who are too scared to ring the customer with bad news or to have the customers complaining. That staff are tired of being badly treated by customers or yelled at or whatever. And so they're avoiding ringing customers, which is therefore making the problem even worse. But if you knew that if a customer had the opportunity to complain and then you could at least listen to them, manage it, do something with it to make the customer feel better, and then the customer is actually happy, you would then listen to them. You wouldn't be scared of making these calls, because each of these calls, a complaint is not a complaint. It's a cry for help. And it's usually a cry for help. If someone is bothered to complain, you haven't lost them as a customer. There's still an existing customer. Someone who isn't bothered to complain, you've already lost.
It's true.
Don't bother. They're not engaged with you as an organization. You've already lost them.
Yeah, that's why a famous retailer in America said the customer that complains is your friend. They're the ones that they want to help you. The ones that don't want to help you have already gone. You haven't even seen them.
Yep. Or they're terrorists. They go out and badmouth you to what the latest stats is now, to 30 people on average, in their network. Wow. 30 people. And that's before taking a lot of all the social media into account. That's verbal bad-mouthing. That's not taking social media bad-mouthing into account.
People's warriors.
Yeah. See, I've seen, I've worked with businesses where they've actually implemented a call a customer program in their business. A lot of them don't deal, firsthand with customers. So it's a way for them to actually know who they're selling to. And yet the take up on this from employees is very, very low. They're actually scared because of things like complaints. And that kind of stops them from wanting to deal with customers. Do you see a lot of these programs being implemented, Angela? Is that something that you also do?
Some customers do, but what they tend to do, a lot more customers do now, is they do a customer survey where they're touching multiple touch points within the customer's organization. So if I was, if you were talking to someone who, let's say the customer is a tradesman and of a company that supplies building products, that building products company will have us talk to the owner of the business, the wife or whoever the admin person is, and so they can express their views and their frustrations or experiences, as well as the person on site who's waiting for the delivery of the products, the toilet seat or whatever it might be to put into a new home, etc. And he'll have a view on the truck delivery driver and the person where he placed it and how he, unloaded things. So you might do 5 or 6 interviews for one customer to make sure you cover their touch points that they have with your organization. And you'll find a lot of negatives. You'll find positives as well. You don't just do this to get your negatives, but you can find out why people like you and use your business and why they don't, or why they're frustrated by using your business. And those frustrations then get reported back to the owner, the senior management team, whoever it is. And that's a really quick way of finding out from the majority of your customers or a big proportion of your important customers or whatever, what are their frustrations or their issues, and then you can start addressing them. And then you would put in what we call a follow-up process where you would sit down and review some of these learnings and potential improvements with some of your most important customers. Thanks, we've done this research. This is what we've heard. This is what we're going to do. Is this going to help our relationship improve? Is this going to help how we service your business? And it's a great starting point then for them to open up, especially you're not confronting a customer by saying, why did you say we're bad? You're confronting a customer by saying, we've spoken to 50 of our customers or whatever the number might be, and this seems to be a common theme. How does this affect you? How can we make this better for you?
There's a phrase that's used, a net promoter score.
Yeah. I'm an accredited certified net promoter. Yeah.
Great, because what is it? I've got no idea. What's the net promoter score mean? Yeah.
Well, look, I'm a certified net promoter practitioner, and from Satmetrics and Bain & Co. and I went to New York to do it. And look, I think there's a pros and cons to the net promoter score. CEOs, boards love it because it gives them one number that is that is supposed to be measured consistently the same way and interpreted the same way. So then they can actually compare their organisation to another organisation. The problem is it was developed for consumer research. And so most consumers, if they're happy with their company or their product, their supplier or their product or their service, will give a 9 or a 10. And therefore they're promoters, and that works well. But most business customers think an 8 out of 10 is bloody good. And so you're never going to have promoters. And so it makes the way the Net Promoter System works is you ask people that if the opportunity arose, or based on this recent experience or based on whatever, how likely are you to recommend company X to either friends, family, if you're doing consumers, or if it was in a business context, you'd be saying if the opportunity arose, how likely are you to recommend company X to colleagues, industry peers, etc. And they will give you a score between 0 to 10. They're asked to give you a score. 0, they're not at all likely to recommend. At 10, they're extremely likely to recommend. If someone gives you a 9 or a 10, then they're called a promoter. So that's someone who's out there promoting your business to others, and they're also considered to be an advocate and loyal. If you're a promoter, if you have lots of promoters, to bottom line, it means that you've got more people who are likely to be supportive of your business and forgive you when mistakes happen. Then at the other end of this extreme, if someone is a 0 to a 6, if they've given you a score anywhere from 0 to 6, they're called a detractor. And a detractor is someone, if they're in a position of authority or decision-making, they will not use you in the future. And that detractor, especially a really negative detractor, so what I call someone who's more 0 to 4, someone who's a real negative detractor, those people will actually badmouth you to on average 25 to 30 people each. Now, in the middle of all this, there are the 7 to 8s. The 7 to 8s are considered to be passives. They're people that are generally satisfied, but they're not really promoting you. There's no guarantee there's any loyalty there, and they're going to use you again. A really good way of thinking of a passive as well is as a swinger. They swing. For a 1% better or for $10 cheaper, they'll go to a competitor. You stuff up on your last delivery or your last service, they'll go to a competitor. They might come back, but they'll try a competitor. Whereas the loyalist will give you another go and another go before he moves. So the way the Net Promoter Score then is calculated is you take the percentage, not the number, very important, the percentage of people that gave you a 9 or a 10, and you take from that percentage the people that gave you a 0 to 6 percentage. So let's say you had 50% of your customers were promoters, and you had 50% of your customers were detractors. Nobody gave you a 7 or an 8. You would have a 0 Net Promoter Score, because it would be 50 minus 50% is 0. If you had 50% promoters and you had let's say you had 30% promoters and you had 40% detractors, then you would have a minus 10 score, because you have more detractors than you have promoters. And if they're all passives, if all your customers are a 7 and 8, you'd be a 0, because a 7 or an 8 is you'd have 0 promoters and 0 detractors, therefore you've got a 0. And in Net Promoter land, you can get a score between minus 100 to plus 100. Best practice performing companies, if they're working in a B2C environment, so they're servicing a consumer customer, your best practice would be an over plus 75 Net Promoter Score. And there are lots of companies that are over plus 75. If you're working in B2B land and industrial markets and business to business, so your customer's a business customer or organisation, then your best practice Net Promoter Score is going to be above plus 50. Because in business to business, a lot of people, as I said, will give an 8, and it's as good as you're going to get. We deal with a lot of customers who just say, I think an 8 out of 10 is bloody good. I'm not going to give anybody any more, because then they're going to get complacent.
I tell you where we make some mistakes is we make mistakes as we focus on those 0 to 5 as the ones that are, we're trying to make them customers. Because what we should be doing is spending money on the people that actually really look after us and trying to add more value to those people, because they're going to spend more money. But we're always obsessed with what we don't have. So we go, let's go and try and make, this unloyal customer loyal to me. Well, they're probably loyal to somebody else, so don't worry about it.
Well, what you want to do is not, members, you don't want to ignore those detractors. You want to be able to have them in a place. You might think it's going to cost us too much money to turn them into loyalists. They're not worth the effort. But what you don't want is to have them out there behaving like terrorists and detractors and telling people how bad you are. So you need them to put a plug in it, basically. So you need to be able to get them to the point where they think you're okay and not care enough about you to talk about you. So it'll take a little bit of effort, not a lot though.
So interesting. And Angela, for those that are listening that want to work out their Net Promoter Score, do they need to use a company like yours? Is there a website they can go to?
You can go to the SAP Metrics. SAP Metrics and Frederick Reichheld from Bain & Co. are the two co-inventors of the Net Promoter Score. And there's a lot of stuff. If you go to their sites, you'll see it's a simple calculation. You've got to use the 0 to 10 scale. It can't have a midpoint. So you don't use a 1 to 5, don't use anything else. It's got to be 0 to 10, and you've got to stay true to the question that how likely they are to recommend. And then the other thing you can't change, and we see lots of people playing dodgy games here, where they'll change the rating scale. They'll make the 10 as being, I'm a good performer. Will you give me a 10? And I'm a satisfactory performer at 9. Just to force people to move up the line and give them 9s or 10s. But it's not. It's extremely likely to recommend is a 10 and a 9, and 0 to 6 is they're unlikely to recommend you, or extremely unlikely at the 0 and 1. So you've got to stay very true. So once you get a 0, so once you've asked all your customers that 0 to 10 scale, and it's much more valuable in consumer markets if you're servicing your customers, an end user or a consumer. And once you've got those scores, and let's say you've asked 10 customers and you work out what the percentage of the people that asked you a 9 or 10 is, and you see how many percentage of your people were 0 to 6, and you take the negatives away from the positive percent, and you're going to get your plus or minus or 0 in Net Promoter Score. Very easy to do yourself. There is absolutely no rocket science behind it.
And like we learned last week, you've got to do it over a time period so you can compare like for like.
You've got to be able to track it. You've got to be able, a one-off is not good. You've got to keep doing it. And, that's why every time I go to get my car serviced, I get, based on this, your most recent service with us, and they do it every 6 months, how likely are you then to recommend, company X to someone else, and you've got to be able to track and keep it consistent. And you know what, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter whether it's the wrong metric or the right metric. When tracking, it's all about consistently using and doing the same thing so that you can actually measure change.
Yeah. And Angela, while we were talking about the Net Promoter Score, something that came to mind was this employee engagement surveys that a lot of large corporates do.
Which we do a lot of, yeah.
Yeah, and it's become very popular. People pride themselves on, raising a employee engagement survey. I've seen people get jobs because they've, increased it by 25% in one corporate area and they've gone to another. When it comes to small and medium businesses, is this something that they should be doing, an employee engagement survey, especially when they've got 10 staff, for example?
Yeah, if you have less than 10, it almost makes it almost obsolete because you can't guarantee people anonymity. But if you've got to use an independent to do this, because otherwise they're not going to tell you, the staff aren't going to tell you the truth. It's also better to do it online and anonymously. And you just got to keep it simple and not ask for too many things that are likely to identify people. So you need to be able to ensure confidentiality so that people can feel confident as being a collective of, they won't be able to see my answer on its own, but I'll be one of 10, and this is the collective result based on our employees, of our 10 employees. But it's really important because we do a lot of customer research and we do a lot of market share research and competitor research and market research, and we do a lot of employee research. We've been able to confirm that there is a direct link between employee engagement and customer engagement, and that it's usually a 6-month lag. If we see a dip in the employee engagement score, it is guaranteed that within 6 months you will see your customer engagement score dip. And then depending on your industry and your business, 6 to 12 months time, you will see a dip in your sales or EBIT or, market share. And if employees, and it's also the reverse happens, when employees see that customers are happy, even if they're not as happy with the employer, they will score more positively than when customers are unhappy and they feel they're working for a horrible boss and my customers are unhappy, they'll be just negative as well. So everything is interrelated, and employee engagement is critical. You need to know whether your customers will recommend your place of work as a place of work to, not necessarily to family, because a lot of people don't want their family to work with them, but would you recommend it to friends or friends of friends if you heard someone was looking for a job? And that's usually a really good test of what they would think of their employer or their place of work.
Yeah. And I guess, Angela, just, you spoke about being anonymous and confidential and things like that. When we use someone like the market intelligence company, do you find that if you do get the more honest answers as opposed to, getting a staff member in a business to do something, to save that money? Is that one of the benefits?
Absolutely. We've had a lot of companies who said, I had my reps go out and administer this survey or ask our customers a few questions. But, I didn't really get to I just got back what they usually tell me, so we've got to do it all over again now. These are the things I want to get. Why don't you go and ask the customers? And the results are not like the person that services your business, your account, So as a customer, you think the rep's fairly okay, but, they've got little mistakes. But he's such a nice person, and I don't want him to lose his job. You can't to go back and be horrible to him, and you don't want to upset him, And we've had reps who go out in other customers that we survey, who'll say, all the financial problems I've been having because my wife's sick and she's got to have all this treatment and my kid needs braces. If you could just possibly think about giving me a 9 on the next round of the NPS survey, because then I can get my bonus. Do you know how many people do that? And it's called gaming, the NPS, obviously, or gaming. But they do it because it's the only way they can get their score of 9 to then meet a KPI that's linked to their bonus or pay rise or whatever it might be. So, and, if you had your reps or someone in your own company do it in customer service, so you've already got a team of customer service people, they're ringing up a customer, the customer says how unhappy they are. Do you think they're going to tell the boss or their supervisor that this customer's not happy with this level of service? They're not. They'll say what they want to say. They really love me, but they prefer that so-and-so in the other department would also do a better job. It's human nature. These people aren't genuinely trying to be dishonest. It's human nature. We don't like to say bad things about each other. And we don't like to hear bad things about each other, including myself. If I get a bad rap, I hate it. I never talk to that customer again, which is very, very wrong.
No, it's so true. And Angela, for anyone that's listening, because we are out of time and I'll be handing over to Mimo to wrap up shortly, for anyone that wants more information on what you and your company do, where can they go for more information?
Obviously, our website's a good point, www.market-intelligence.com.au. But, our phone number is 8336 8000, and ask for me. I always make time to talk to any business owner or any person in business, whether they want some advice or something. And it's not about trying to sell my services. It's about helping them or point them in the right direction and give them some thought starters, or maybe you should consider X or Y because you're only considering this, or this might be better. And it's not about selling my company or my services. It's just about helping another human being in their business, because I know what that's like.
That's wonderful. I know I've learned a lot from this hour. So thank you, Angela. And over to you, Mimo.
Well, I think it's great. I think, Angela, thanks very much for helping us out here and giving us some insights. This is a topic which we could go on for hours and hours, and I think there's so much that we haven't covered. The key takeouts, obviously, that time is money. So the time you spend trying to do stuff yourself, it's not necessarily what time was spent. It's because you actually pay for it anyway. Never time to do it right, always time to do it again is something I've always tried to live by. It's interesting you came from a management buyout situation, so you've been big business, and that's something you can impart on small business as well. We talked about primary versus secondary data, which is very, very interesting, and how you were very much into measurement. I like how you actually say to mystery shop your business, which that is a really interesting way of looking at things, how we mystery shop our business, because at the end of the day, it's a customer that has to benefit or has to have an exposure to your business. Your leadership lessons were really interesting. I thought process, procedure, and risk minimizations are the real key points there. And I think, the bad things or the negative things about big business is politics and bureaucracy and decision making is what we can overcome that in small businesses. So that's really good that you've taken some lessons from big business, and certainly business of my size, the problem we have is process and procedure because we've come from a small business mentality. We spoke about trust, and I think trust is a really important thing, particularly for small business people. I think being brutally honest and to live in someone else's shoes is a really good way of looking at things, is what we call empathy. Net promoter scores, geez, that was a can of worms, wasn't it? So it was great to learn how net promoter scores were, which basically revolves around how likely you are to recommend, and we know that the 9s and the 10s is the very likely to recommend. And I think finishing on employee surveys, because as Richard Branson said, he doesn't necessarily look after customers, he looks after employees. Yep. If you look after employees, then they will look after customers. And certainly I've learned in my own business, if my employees are very engaged, I don't have to worry if my customers are not happy, because then my employees, are a reflection of the company. And as you grow a business, you need to trust in your employees. So I think that's incredible. So thank you so much for your time. And okay. Like I said, we could go on for years. This is great.
Well, just keep remembering, number 1 should be your employees, number 2 should be your customers, and number 3 should be your bottom line, your cost or your profit. That's really what a good leader should be looking at.
I put my suppliers in there as well, Angela, because we've got,
I've
got emotional European suppliers, and they can take the football and go home at any time, So I treat suppliers better than I treat customers because they're emotional Europeans,
Yeah. Well, I know all about those, trust me.
It's been wonderful. Thank you so much, Angela.
No, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk.
Lovely.
Love to talk about this stuff. Happy to talk to you guys. And if I can help any of your listeners or anybody in the future, no matter how, happy to help.
Very good.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you everyone for tuning in. For more information on Leader Talk and for some great resources to help your business grow, check out brainiac.com.au. Thanks everyone.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.